Who speaks for God? And who speaks for the Church? For many, the answers to these questions were rapidly flipped and fried on Tuesday when the postal survey results were announced and the entire country was briefly bathed in a carnival of colour, an Antipodean Munchkinland. It would be entirely wrong to see Australia's decisive support for marriage equality as a defeat for Christianity. After all, Liberal Senator Dean Smith, whose bill legalising same-sex unions is about to be made into law, is a Christian. Labor Senator Penny Wong, too, is a woman of faith who has worshipped at uniting churches. Wednesday was, she said, a day of grace. It was, though, a defeat for a certain brand of public, conservative Christianity, one that has focused on sexuality, morality and traditional views of men and women. And a triumph for the grassroots, those in the pews who, as polls repeatedly showed, quietly tolerated but did not share the views of their church leaders, and for those who continually asked why the unelected Australian Christian lobby is viewed as the voice of Christianity in this country when its membership is so small, and, as researcher Stephanie Judd found, is dominated by Baptists and Pentecostals. The scenes were galvanic, visceral roars of relief, visible slumping, uncontrolled tears of joy, unabashed dancing, volcanic eruptions of hope and decency and fairness. Is it really possible to say God was not part of that? That God was sitting cranky on the sidelines, lamenting that more people will now formally vow to spend their lives caring for each other? We have never entirely understood the full diversity of Christianity in this country. We tend to see it as narrow and controlling. But we're not stupid. We know Jesus, the great disruptor, was on about something the Pharisees were not. This was evident on Gogglebox recently when the families were watching Magda Zabarski, in a powerfully contained, lacerating and vulnerable moment, speak to the Anglican Archbishop of Sydney Drive Glenn Davies on Q&A, about her belief that the Church should not impose its views on a secular society. She said, "I accept that the Church will never marry me, that grieves me in ways you will never know." The cameras then cut to the three Silbury women. Kara said, "But Jesus was all about love." What would Jesus say? He would say vote yes. Grandma Emily piped up, "He loved prostitutes, he loved everyone, and they all chortled." The Reverend Dr. Peter Catt, Dean of St. John's Cathedral in Brisbane, put the case bluntly for Christians for marriage equality. Since the beginning of this survey, we have had a clear and simple message: all people are equally loved by God and deserve to be treated equally under the law. The tension between those who see Christianity as a tool of liberation, and those who see it as a tool of preservation, has long roots. In 1963, when Martin Luther King wrote an open letter to his country from a jail in Birmingham, Alabama, he asked, "Is organized religion too inextricably bound to the status quo to save our nation and the world?" King, who had been arrested for participating in a nonviolent protest, was disappointed with the silences and the implicit condoning of racism among his fellow churchmen.